play guitar and sing.
Sierra, and I play keys and sing.
I'm Mare, and I play bass.
The song is really like a love letter to death. So like what we're really trying to explore like what meaning we can draw from death. So instead of seeing it as like this like far off thing that to something to ignore, something dreadful that it is a bad thing that's gonna come to us all and we should ignore it for as long as possible, to what would it look like if we opened that gift at 26, and like what would that really look like for us, and what meaning could we draw from that? In the song you're kind of hearing us figure that out in real time. Opening the gift of death and what's inside is like presence, right? Like if I really understand like, hey, all of this, all the things I've worked for, loved for, fought for, they're all gonna go away one day. Like I'm gonna just vanish one day. Like then it sort of leaves you with the sentiment of like, well, why wouldn't I make it as fun and as beautiful as I can, and why would I not make it like is easy and beautiful for other people? And so I guess that's kind of like where the sentiment of the song is like is coming from. And ironically, the song was completely written and produced before like we knew about COVID-19, or before quarantine, or like the murder of George Floyd and the ensuing protests, before like California fires, like before like all like the dystopian roller coaster rides we've been on this year. Literally every day that goes by, I feel like, wow, this song became more relevant and more relevant and more relevant and more relevant. And I think it's sort of because, like, I think we were all sort of wanting to yell like everything ends up ending. Like we all had this feeling of like shouting into the darkness or something like that. And so like the even the title's like purposefully kind of dramatically punk rock in that way. I almost think Everything Ends Up Ending is one of the most optimistic songs we've ever written. So hiding it in sort of like this like jammy like punk rock like felt right. It felt good to do that.
Chris first sent the song, I literally like screamed because I was so excited. And it was so cool. It was just so different, and I just screamed because I was like, "This is so good." And I like that it has like an optimistic tone, like you said, Chris, masked in more of like a heavier instrumentation there. So I'm excited about it.
I had the same kind of sentiments. I was really excited when Chris showed it to us. It was just like so, it felt so different from kind of what we had worked on for our last album, but it also felt like so us too. Because that is a lot of our inspiration kind of has, we grew up with like a lot of pop punk and rock and alternative music. So and I think a lot of the lyrics, it was really cool. They were definitely very vulnerable, while having a totally different sort of sonically very different than what we've had, but lyrically had some similar themes. So yeah, very excited to play it live and very excited for it to come out.
we we're trying we always like want to do the put in it just as much like art and storytelling into the artwork as we do the music, right? Because they're like one experience. Similarly in like the music, we're always trying to find like this tension point, like trying to be between two polar opposite contradictory things. And that's where I think Laureline finds a lot of songwriting and our truth in there. I was trying to find like the contradictory nature in the universe anyway. So like I was thinking a lot about like math and science, and most like forward research right now is sort of finding like they're at root level it's all kind of contradictory. Like with math there's like axioms that don't add up, or like in science and physics, like if you look at subatomic particles, they don't make sense. Like if you observe them they act differently than if you don't observe them. And so like built into reality seems to be like contradictory nature a little bit. And when I was like finding that, I was like, oh, that's such a Laureline thought. Like that's such like a thing that I want to run with and write with. I was thinking about like how that translated into artwork, and I was thinking like, oh, there's something so like Picasso or like Cubist about that, like painting something from a bunch of different angles on top of each other. And I was like, how could we work that out, and in almost like a cubist way. I was talking to Alexandra Sutra, who did all the artwork for our last record, and And he was like, well, I'm actually really interested in quantum mechanics myself. And so we were like, oh, this is perfect. So we started like talking about it. And he came up with the idea of like, okay, what if we photographed a subject, and then he gave it to Jesse Draxler, who we were able to work with on this artwork, which I'm like huge fan of that guy. I'm like, I'm still can't believe we were able to do that. And so he gave the artwork to him, and Jesse cut it up and put it together. And all the scraps that he didn't, he gave back to Alex, and Alex actually made a second cover. So there's actually two covers for the song, and for all the singles there will be two covers, which is so like built into the artwork is like this contradiction of like yes and no. So I think like what we wanted was like build into the artwork to be like the same kind of thesis statement that a lot of the music is coming from.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, like seriously.
I was just gonna echo what you said. I think is cool that like Chris and Mare are, well, you know, when people are just really good at a lot of things and it's annoying. But no, I'm just kidding. But I think it is really special that like their vision for art is filled with like within music, within actual art and photography and like graphic design and like the scope of that. That it is like a more of, it's a holistic view of the music, I think, and I think that's super special. So I'm grateful for their eyes for that. Yeah, they're super talented.
Was it always easy for you guys to kind of just lay it all out there, wear your heart on your sleeve?
That's sort of why I got into it at all. I'm really drawn to people's vulnerability, and so like that's the thing that I'm always trying to like pull out of myself. Like how can I write something more personal than the last thing that I did, or how can this performance be a little bit more vulnerable than the last performance? Like we're constantly like after that. And actually I was thinking about this like the other day when we recorded Everything Ends Up Ending. For some reason I think it was like the vocal booth was broken or something like that, or not set up. And so I remember I think I recorded vocals like next to you guys, like, and next to the engineer too. So we were just like, I'm literally just like yelling into a mic like feet from each other in a silent room. And I remember thinking like, this is so vulnerable. Like I remember being like, oh man, like you're really gonna hear it if I just miss, you know? And I remember thinking how much more vulnerable that felt than like the sound booth where it's like a closed door, dark lighting, like no one can see your face. If you like mess up the gut, you're just like, oh Jesus Christ. Like and so I remember like feeling so vulnerable recording that, and I was like, wow, I bet a lot of that found its way into the actual performances. And so I was just thinking about that, and I was like, oh wow, that's so funny. Is that like everything counts, like even where you put the mic counts so much into how the song feels. Um, but yeah, so I feel like that's something you're really good at, Sierra. Like you'll send me demos all the time where I'm just like, dude, I want to be able to figure out how to get like half that much emotion and like vulnerability into takes. So I'm more curious. I'm also interviewing you here. I want to know how you do it.
That's so funny because I feel that way about you. But I was even thinking about when you mentioned that about how you, I remember you recording those vocals for Everything Ends Up Ending. But then I remember we did the same thing for like, I feel like two of the most like emotional songs for us for the last record, Timing and Ladies Man. We did the same thing like back to back. And I remember you were just like, I'm gonna scream, guys, whatever. And then I just am like, Chris is so good at just sending it with like without inhibition. And I think that's so funny that you think that for me. But one of the things I appreciate about writing with you, Chris, I appreciate how you are able to understand like when I'm like, here are my lyrics, like help me come up with like a cohesive theme or like something that can be like unified in any form, and you're going to be like, this is what I'm hearing you say, let's make this more like specific or like hone in on this piece. And so I think Chris is really good at like taking those pieces and being like, this is what I'm hearing you saying and I'm just adding on. So I appreciate that part of writing with Chris for one of the things. But I think too, just learning from his vulnerability and emotion in music has helped me, because I don't think when you were saying at the beginning, is it like easy for you to be that, or is it like harder? And I resonated more with the latter, especially with collaborative writing, because most of my life I would just write singular and just me and didn't really collaborate with too many people. um, so it's definitely like challenging, but I also think without that collaboration, there are a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to like put to words or say on my own. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, and I feel like a lot of times, like it's easier, like, because you do the hard work of uh like the big exhale of like gurgitation of like it's out on a page, you know what I mean? And a lot of times, I think it's easier for someone so like a third party to look at it and be like, yeah, I'm actually sort of feeling like it's maybe this is what you're telling me or something. But like you can only that person can only feel that if you already do the work of like carving yourself out and putting it on a page, you know what I mean? So like that is why collaboration is so necessary a lot of times, even if just like um tell me what you're hearing here, you know? And so like honestly, like you'll give me lyrics a lot of time where I'm just like, oh, you already did the hard work, I just feel like you're telling me this, you know? And then we can just like sort of run with it a little bit more. And I feel like vice versa, I do all the time too. I'm like, is there anything here? What do you think? Do you think it's easy to be vulnerable there?
I think one thing about like Deer and Chris, knowing them for years, like they're two very authentic people, and even when we're just hanging out, we have very like real conversations about things that I don't talk to other people about. So it feels very authentic when I also see that in their writing, and so yeah, it's a really cool thing to kind of be like like a almost like an audience member with kind of like the lyrics part of the songwriting. So it's really cool.
I got into music because, like, I guess I wanted to like uh someone to listen to me. Like, even as a kid, I think I was like really trying to be heard, and like music is like the enterprise of like being heard. Like, I think I was really drawn to that just with like the circumstances that I had as a kid. It was like I just felt like drawn to wanting to say something and have it be listened to. And so I always had like this attachment towards it. And it always felt like my like first love kind of thing. I never would have said like I wanted to do that like with my career or something like that. And like even still that feels like a little weird somehow. Like I remember even the moment I was kind of like, oh wow, I wanted to do this, like be an artist or something like that. It was like it was after like watching like a Terrence Malick film. I was like, I didn't know that you can make someone feel that way, and so I was like, I kind of want to figure out like how to make an audience feel that way, and just do it with music instead of like sequences, you know.
I've always been um, very into art. I grew up and was drawing all the time and like painting all the time. And I remember being pretty young. I would be listening to songs and kind of making them into like art pieces, especially with the Bright Eyes album, I'm Wide Awake It's Morning. A lot of those songs were so like visual. Like I was like, okay, what if I like drew this song basically, or like made this song into art? So I think that was one way that kind of like Chris was saying, like express myself. It hasn't been like easy for me to share my feelings and thoughts always growing up. So I think music and art was definitely a way to kind of like be like, oh yeah, the way that he said it, that's like how I feel too. I might not like know how to say this to you in person, but like I can express it through this. That's kind of how I started getting into really into music. And then my brother was a guitarist, and my brother's like super naturally good at music, and he was like, I'm playing guitar, so you're gonna learn bass. So I learned bass in like 6th grade. He taught me "Say It Ain't So" by Weezer. That was the first song I learned, and from then I was just like, this is kind of my thing. And it kind of like, even with my personality, kind of like goes along. I think that bass like is a very fitting instrument for me too.
Even what you were saying, Danny, too, I grew up like really into theater and like just music in general and like that whole field. My dad's a musician. My twin brother actually is. So I think growing up with a family that played music was very influential in my love for music. And then for the longest time too, like it's the only thing I knew I loved doing. So even going into college, when I was deciding a major, I was like, well, I don't like doing anything else, so why would I do anything but music? So like for me, I just had always had like that linear, like I love this, so why would I not try to do it? But yeah, I learned like piano and guitar at a young age, and I started songwriting. Can't talk songwriting at a young age also, and kind of similar to what you were saying, Mare, just that being a way to express myself and put words to feelings or whatever it was that I didn't even know I was doing it until the song was already written. And I mean, that happens now still too, but just like the beginnings of that, thinking back on that, I'm like, yeah, that was actually a really good foundation for how I write and like to write now, and how I feel like music influences me now. The same that Mare said about like when you hear a song and you're like, oh, I felt like that is something I would have written but didn't know how to write, and then those words are right there laid out for you. So yeah, songwriting is such a gift for sure. I was just thinking like how cool it is that, well, we talked about a little bit about this, but how art influences art, and how we can like for sure think of like a handful of albums or specific songs or artists from like, I can do that, where like each year or like season where you're like, that influenced me to write this. And so it's cool to think like, oh, something that someone else created influenced someone to create that, and then this could be something that encourages someone to create something new too. So I think that's really powerful.
Is there like a dream band or artist you guys would love to like open up for, collaborate with?
Dude, okay, you sent this over earlier, and so I thought of, I was like, I took it really seriously here. So I think the first one, it has to go Bon Iver. I think that one, just like, that's a show I would just want to watch. Like if we could tour with him, it would be it would be like 50 free tickets to go see Bon Iver. And then the next one I think it has to be Frank Ocean.
Chris, those were both mine, and you didn't even say it. You said Bon Iver in the text, and I had already thought Bon Iver, and then I was like, I'm gonna say Frank.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight.
We'll be on the same tour, hopefully.
Well, yeah, I think the obvious Bon Iver, Frank Ocean, Laureline lineup, I think it's really feasible and doable. Music is power, and maybe more powerful than politics in a lot of ways, like, because music can change culture, which is way, way, way more powerful. And I want to make sure to be responsible with that power, because nothing makes me more furious than like unnutritious meals that musicians give us a lot of times. And that just like, I don't know, because the impact isn't on us necessarily, it's on like 13-year-old kids, and like who might not be able to weed out like a damaging message or a meaningless message, So I always want to be like really responsible.
I think just like staying as authentic as possible, as long as we're like having fun and making stuff that we love, I think, I'm kind of happy with it. I think also just like growing as musicians and creatively, and as visual artists too, always kind of getting better at what we're doing and honing in on kind of what we want our message to be.
On top of that, it would be really cool to do a tour. Accomplish a tour.
Yeah. Of like everything ends up ending a little bit is like it's all gonna go, and so like have a good time with it, like have fun with it, like do it for as long as you want to do it for, like just enjoy it and really like live the experience of it the whole time, through the ups and downs or the funs or the banging your head against the wall, like just like really be there for it the whole time.
All right,
well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Danny.
Have a
Nice
good
to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.